Welcome to First Reading, the Old Testament lectionary pod.
Don't watch yourself. Do not watch
No,
yourself. It make them
I caught myself out of the corner of my eye.
It's the worst.
Welcome to First Reading, the Old Testament lectionary podcast for preachers everywhere. I'm Reverend Dr. Tim McNinch. I'm an assistant professor of Hebrew Bible at Christian Theological Seminary in Indianapolis.
And I'm Reverend Dr. Rachel Wren, assistant professor of biblical studies at Trinity Lutheran Seminary at Capital University. Happy Easter, preachers!
Happy Easter!
Thought you were going to chime in on that.
Jesus Christ is risen today. Hallelujah.
Sorry, y'all are in the midst of Holy Week. You're like, I just need an Easter sermon. Please just get on with it. Well, the good news is you have made it through Lent. You've gotten this far. The end is in sight. Congratulations. We have a text for you today for April 20th, 2025. And Tim is going to be focusing on Isaiah 65. So you're pulling Easter out of Isaiah, right, Tim?
Right. I mean, who in their right mind would not preach from the Old Testament on Easter Sunday, right?
Natural affinity there, for sure.
Yes, I dug through. There are like 17 texts available for Easter, right? And I found the one that's from the Old Testament.
That's right. Yeah, what'd you do with it?
Okay, well, for one thing, take a look at Isaiah 65, starting in, verse 17?
Yeah, it's so
It
good.
is a beautiful, beautiful prophetic poem. I'm about to create a new heavens and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered. They shall build houses and inhabit them, plant their vineyards. They'll not labor or be in vain or bear children for calamity. Before I call, they'll answer. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. They'll not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. Which is your favorite verse in the whole Bible, I would guess.
Oh, it super is. How did you know? It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
This whole poem is just amazingly beautiful. So even if you're not going to preach on it, slip it in there as one of the readings. Assign your best reader to come up and read this as part of the Easter service. It's a beautiful vision of an alternative reality. Let me give just a touch of context here. So this is Isaiah 65, way at the end of the book of Isaiah, right? Isaiah 66 chapters. This is the end of chapter 65. So we're almost there. We would call this third Isaiah. So a chunk of the big book of Isaiah that is probably set in the time after the return from exile, as the people of Judah were kind of trying to figure out again who they are and what it means to live as a people in the land, even though they don't have a king of their own, and even though they are being ruled by a foreign imperial power, sometimes tolerant of them and other times not. So in that context of getting to come home, but trying to figure out what it's like to rebuild, what the practicalities are on the ground, and that they don't always live up to the hype, comes much of these last several chapters of the book of Isaiah, wrestling with those realities.
Yeah. I think that's helpful historical context, especially because this is a colonized people who are never going to be on their own 2 feet again. And that can be hard for us to relate to as the dominant culture in a dominant country. But this idea of like reality doesn't always live up to what we think it should be. That's something that I think, everybody pretty much could get behind.
Yeah. And, even though I myself kind of embody, I'm a person of privilege in a dominant culture and a dominant world power, and still I feel some of the sense of stress and uncertainty about where the future of our world is going, whether it's wars or the rise of empire, nationalistic sort of ideologies and climate change. And there's all these things that just, you wonder about, even like bringing children into this type of world, right?
Yeah.
Which is something that this poem actually addresses head on.
It is. Yeah.
So there's lots of places where even congregations who are, for the most part, embedded in the seat of international power and privilege can still find some places of connection. And all the
Mhm.
more so for congregations whose members are among the less privileged or oppressed
Mhm.
in this world.
Mhm.
There's a lot of connections here to be made.
Yeah. How did you land on this for Easter? What's your Easter angle to it besides just being this incredibly gorgeous piece of scripture?
Yeah, so the theme of the poem as a whole is new creation,
Nice.
recreation,
Mhm.
which is, you might say, an Easter theme.
Yeah, no.
And
Yeah.
so it starts out verse 17 in the NRSV UE. Maybe the next edition of the NRSV will add more letters, so it'll be yeah,
UENSP
exactly.
ASAP.
RSVP. I am about to create a new heavens and a new earth. So you have this picture
Mm.
of the renewal of all things, kind of a
Mhm.
callback to Genesis 1:1,
Mm.
the creating of the heavens and the earth. And by the way, in the Hebrew, it's the same words. You've got bara
Yeah.
as the verb, and you've got, of course, shemaim
Hashemite.
va'aretz.
Nice.
But these are renewed heavens
Mhm.
and an earth. So there's a kind of moving into the future by undoing the pain of the
Mm.
past and
Mhm.
going
Mm.
back to that moment where things were as God intended them to be.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that picture of new creation filters through the whole poem.
Mhm.
And we see at the very end, verse 25, the wolf and the lamb shall feed together, the lion shall eat straw like the ox, but the serpent, its food shall be dust. Little Genesis 3 uh, recollection there. They shall
Sorry,
not
snakes.
they shall not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain. There's a picture there of like a what we might call a pre-fall
Mm. Mm.
Edenic vision of creation where it's in harmony. The animal kingdom is in harmony. There's
Oh.
no violence except for the one enemy who's a threat to
Mhm.
humankind, the serpent,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
is still put in its place.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like this image of creation, recreation, and then thinking about that in terms of resurrection, because I think, one of the things that makes Jesus's resurrection so profound is that he's not given a new body. At least if we're talking the Gospel of John, it is still the wounded,
Hmm.
pierced, crucified body, but it is new. And I really like that because I think sometimes when we talk about like, well, heaven and earth and the end times and eschatology, all of this is going to go away and God's going to do something completely different. And at the beginning, it kind of sounds like that. I'm about to create a new heavens and a new earth. But then they talk about vineyards and houses and fruit and infants and labor and lambs and oxen and all things that we know. So it's not even like the destruction of something in order to create something new. It somehow retains its identity or its integrity in some way, but God makes it new all the same.
Hmm. Yeah, that tension between the old and new is another theme that runs through the poem. I
Mm.
mentioned there's a callback to Genesis in these pictures. There's also a callback to First Isaiah with
Mm.
the whole section there at the very end about the wolf and the lamb and the lion and the ox. All of that is quoted verbatim from First Isaiah, from Isaiah 11 verses 6 through 9. That's also where we get "They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain." So that's not original to Third Isaiah here. That's a callback to Rachel's actual favorite verse there in Isaiah chapter 11, not Isaiah 65. But there's a sense there of looking back to that earlier prophetic word, but it's renewed here. There are a couple changes. For one, the serpent, the line about the serpent is new. So
Yeah.
any threat is still tamped down by God's
Mhm.
power here. Um,
Mhm.
and the big thing that's missing from that callback to Isaiah 11 is the branch, the root of Jesse. The
Yeah.
Davidic king, the messianic figure is not a part of this vision at all.
Wow, that's fascinating.
which is the scenario that the Judahites were experiencing in this return from exile, where they were learning what it meant to be a people under God's rulership for them
Mhm.
without a human king to mediate that for them. So
Wow.
so there's a renewal of being a people, one nation under God, you might say. The other thing where there's kind of the old and new tension here is verse 17. We mentioned, I'm going to create a new heavens and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind,
Mhm.
which is also a callback to earlier in Isaiah. That comes from Isaiah 43, verses 18
Mm.
through 20, which is part of second Isaiah. It's the same idea there of the rishonot, the things from before,
Mhm.
not intruding on your
Mm.
experience of God's newness now. And there's actually, if we can take just a little bit into the Hebrew there, a really beautiful little picture. In verse 17, it says, Lo tizacharna harishonot. So the former things, the rishonot, will not be remembered. And then the next phrase, velo ta'alena alev, and they
Mm.
will not
Ale
rise up upon the heart,
Ah.
which the NRSV translates, or they will not come to mind, which is a good, that's a good translation of alev, not on the mind. But I find just the Hebrew phrase there, lo ta'alena alev, they won't rise up upon the heart, as
Mhm.
really kind of a poignant and direct image of what trauma is like,
Yes.
where the
Mhm.
things from before just assert themselves or rise up on a person's heart and
Yeah.
take over.
Yeah. The intrusive thoughts and memories that overwhelm and incapacitate, that's so important.
Absolutely. And so
Wow,
part
that's
of the picture here is a
yeah.
healing from the communal trauma that this
Mm.
people has experienced, where the things that happened before to them won't interrupt, without invitation upon their hearts and drag them down.
Oh, man, I love this text even more now.
Yeah, isn't that a beautiful image?
It's just gorgeous. It's just gorgeous. And again, it's not that again, if we're talking resurrection, it's not that the pain of the past didn't happen. It's just that it doesn't control your life anymore. It
Mhm.
it doesn't, that's resurrection.
Yeah.
Mm.
And while we're talking about Hebrew, there is another phrase that's repeated several times in this poem, and that is joy or rejoice.
Yeah.
We were talking last week about praise
Mhm.
and some of the ways that we define that term. And here we have a couple interesting terms for rejoicing here. We have noun forms, masos and gila. They both mean joy, but maybe sort of like different flavors of joy, or maybe they're synonyms.
Mhm.
Maybe they needed more than one word to capture this concept, but they
Um,
come in a pair here of
mhm.
rejoicing in joy, masos and gila. And then the verbal forms also appear several times here, sis
Mm.
and gil.
Mm.
Um, and I think what makes these kind of powerful terms for me is that, as far as I can tell from just doing a little bit of look into those particular Hebrew terms, it's less about like the internal feeling of joy or happiness, sameach or whatever that we might expect, but these terms are expressive.
Yeah.
They're externalized. They're
Mm.
eruptions of joy into shouts and praises
Mhm.
and where you just can't contain it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
most of the joy and rejoicing that is happening here is God's own joy.
Oh,
So
oh.
God's happiness about the new creation of heavens and earth and of Jerusalem as a like a refuge city erupts in shouts of joy because both God and the people are so happy with how this is turning
Love
out.
that. I love that so much. God rejoices at resurrection. That's a
Yeah.
good sermon for Easter.
Yeah, and then one of the last things that I had as I'm sort of picking at the poetry here I've mentioned this in a recent episode before, but that first phrase, "I'm about to create a new heavens and a new earth," I think it's a good rendering of the Hebrew that's there, but we also lose a little something in English there because in Hebrew you've got "hineni," here I
Yeah.
am,
Mhm.
"boreh,"
And
creating
creating.
a new
Yeah.
heavens and new earth. So this
Yeah.
is not a far off future. You could render this in a kind of future tense, "I'm about to," but in
Yeah.
any case, it's the beginnings of it are happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here I am doing it.
Yeah.
And so
Watch this.
exactly,
Right?
exactly. And so there's an
Yeah.
invitation in this poem that despite the appearances of coming back to the land and it being the slog and struggle of rebuilding and economic hardship and under the auspices of a foreign empire, that if you
Mhm.
just stopped and like peeled back this
Mm.
reality, underneath it, there is something else happening right now
Yeah.
which is a process of recreation that will spill into joy and safety and security, the kind of life where you would want to bring children into the world, and it's all there if you would just pause to take a look at it. And I
Mm.
think that also is a great Easter message as
Yeah.
we're looking back at the ancient resurrection of Jesus Christ, looking forward to the future resurrection of ourselves and our loved ones, but there's also resurrection happening right now, even in the midst of all of the craziness that's happening around us. If we would just, pause and take a look for it, we would see it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. There's like there's like 6 Easter sermons that we've brought up that you could preach out of this. And I think what I love so much about this is, like, people think they know what they're getting when they come to an Easter service, like, you're gonna talk about Jesus. If you start talking Isaiah and you, like, draw people in and you deepen it, deepen it, deepen it, and then you get to one of those points, and then you move to Jesus, like, it just enriches and deepens and surprises, and
Right.
that might help us hear the message anew in a way that makes it even more meaningful for our lives. So
I think
I
so. I
think
mean, that's a big point that we like to make here on the
Mhm.
podcast as we're dealing with the relationship between the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, and particularly the gospel around Jesus. When Jesus often said that what he did and what was happening to him was a fulfillment of the
Yeah.
scriptures, right? But I
Mhm.
don't think generally he meant that the prophets predicted that this would happen and now it's happening, but
Mhm.
that the things that he was about were in line with the
Yeah.
vision of reality and of God's presence in reality that was embedded in the
Yes.
scriptures. And here we see a great example of that.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful way to talk about it. Well done. Anything else you wanna throw in there, or
No,
that's
let's
just
quit while we're
I
ahead.
no, quit, goodbye. Preachers, I hope you found something in there. And even if you're set on the gospel for your Easter sermon or you're already half done, I hope that this was a little bit of Easter resurrection and theology for you in the midst of a really busy, difficult time.
Yeah.
So, you know where to find us. We're going to be here all Easter season, and we're doing a little bit of a new thing this Easter season ourselves. We are going to do a series on the book of Revelation. So, we're calling it Hebrew Bible Scholars Read the Book of Revelation. And we are very, very excited about it. So if you're not up for Acts this year and you're looking for something maybe a little bit different in the Easter season, come join us in the Book of Revelation. You can find our episodes, of course, on our website, firstreadingpodcast.com. You can find us on iTunes, on Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. It really helps if you can leave us a review or if you can recommend us to friends, family members, whoever you think would deserve the honor of our presence and
Wow.
wisdom. Yeah, there you go. If you have feedback about our honor and presence and wisdom, we would be happy to receive that at firstreadingpodcast@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook as well. Thanks to everyone who's listening. I'm Rachel Wren.
And I'm Tim McNinch. Happy Easter to you all.
Happy Easter.